Hello guys, welcome back to our YouTube channel, and in this video we will be looking at CSS for absolute beginners. It will be a continuation of our YouTube series, so if you have no prior knowledge to web development, this is definitely not the best place to start. I would recommend you to check out our HTML for absolute beginners with a link on the description below, where we explain the web and everything needed to getting started with HTML. So today we will dive deeper into the realm of styling and design as we unlock the potential of CSS. So get ready to level up your web development skills and create visually captivating websites using CSS. Alright guys, so let's get started by looking at some few slides from my PowerPoint presentation. Like I said before, this is just like a lecture guide and not everything about CSS. I made this in order for me to keep this video as simple as possible. On this tutorial, we'll be looking at what is CSS, why is CSS, useful tools needed to getting started with CSS, CSS syntax, and on CSS syntax, we look at selectors and combinators. Then we'll go over to CSS box models, CSS position and layout, CSS pseudo selectors, where we talk about pseudo class and pseudo element. Then we go over some codes and projects using our knowledge of HTML and CSS. So guys, what then is CSS? CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. As the name implies, it is a language that enables us to add styling and beauty to our websites. Like I said before, after HTML has done the markup, that is to say adding the content, the text, the buttons and images and all, CSS will be the language that will enable us to add style and beauty to the website. Coming to the version of CSS, we are currently using CSS 3 and it comes with a lot of newer features and advantages. Now let's go to the reasons why we should learn CSS. The first reason being that CSS is a basic requirement if you want to become a web developer. That is to say, it is one of the three basic languages that are needed in order for you to be a web developer. The first being HTML, the second being CSS, and the third being JavaScript. Now, secondly, CSS describes how elements are to be displayed on the screen, paper, or in other media. Like I said before, it gives the style and beauty of all the contents that are added to the web page using HTML. Thirdly, CSS adds style and beauty to our website. There's not much difference with the second definition. So, like I said, it gives style and beauty to our website. Then, lastly, or not lastly, there are other reasons. So, but the last I have here on my slide is that CSS saves a lot of work. It can control the layout of multiple web pages all at once. We'll get to that shortly. That's trying to portray the point or the meaning of external CSS, whereby we can use a single CSS file to style multiple HTML files. Alright guys, so let's go over to the useful tools needed for getting started with CSS. Like we did in HTML, the useful tools needed for getting started with CSS are just a web browser and a text editor. Now I'm going to go with my choice again of using VS Code and Chrome browser. Of course, there are different options to pick from, like I mentioned in my HTML crash course. Now, after picking up a good text editor and a web browser, the next thing you would look out for is a working knowledge of HTML. That is to say, you need to have a knowledge of HTML. And that's why I mentioned earlier on this course that if you're just getting started and you have no prior knowledge to web development, I would recommend you to check out the HTML crash course for beginners by using the link on the description below. Alright guys, so let's head over to VS Code and start learning about CSS. Now, VS Code, if you remember very well, when we did our HTML crash course, I created a repository called web underscore dev. Now, what I did was that I renamed the repo into web underscore dev underscore YouTube in order for us to locate it easily whenever you visit my repository. Now, another thing I did was that all of the files and projects we created during the HTML class, I created a directory inside this repository and I named the directory HTML underscore class. So I moved all of the files and folder into this directory. So if I happen to see all of the files, the index, the about, and the images, including the project we did during the HTML crash course. Now for CSS, all we're going to be doing is that we're going to create another folder and I'm going to call this folder CSS underscore class so that all of the files and projects we create during this class will be inside this directory. So let's actually get started by creating an index.html file. Now, like I said, CSS does not just work on its own. HTML and CSS works together. So in order for me to write some CSS code, I need to get an HTML file so that I will style the things that are coming from that HTML file. So as usual, we're going to create our boilerplate, which is a doctor declaration that will bring all of these things that are needed to get started with HTML. Now, something to talk about real quick. So guys, let's look at the ways of adding CSS into our HTML file. There are three ways of adding CSS into our HTML file. The first being inline CSS, the second is internal CSS, and lastly, external CSS. Now, what is inline CSS? Inline CSS is added by using a style attribute. Remember when we did our HTML crash course, we talked about attributes and we said attribute gives special meaning and information to our HTML tags that are written at the opening tag. Now, remember I said something, style attribute is a special kind of attribute that takes the style equal to property column value. So that's how we add inline CSS by making use of a style attribute. Now for internal CSS, an internal CSS is added by using a style tag at the head of the HTML file. Then we follow the CSS syntax rules, which says that selector open bracket property column value. So we'll get to that shortly. Now, lastly, we look at the external CSS. An external CSS is added by creating an external CSS file. This is the recommended way of doing CSS because with these, I can be able to use one CSS file to style multiple web pages. Then after creating the external CSS file, what I'll do is that inside the head tag again, I'll bring a link tag. Then I'll specify the path I'm linking to. So that's how to add external CSS. Now, the two method of adding CSS into HTML will have the advantage. Now, if I'm creating a style I want to use just once, I think inline CSS is good, though it's not recommended. Like most of the time, what we do is that we add classes and IDs to our HTML element and we style them using either internal or external CSS. And for internal CSS, it is better than the inline CSS. With internal CSS, I can write much codes, but the disadvantage is that it can only be used to style one HTML file. For external CSS is the recommended way of doing things. The first reason is because it is better to keep your markup from your styling. Then secondly, it can be used to style multiple web pages. So that's that about the ways of adding CSS into our HTML file. Now the next thing we'll look at quickly is the CSS syntax. Now this is CSS syntax. The CSS syntax states that we have our selector, then open curly bracket, then the property and the value. Now CSS is all about property and value. Now if you look at the right hand side over here, I have CSS selectors. Now for these selectors, we talked about the element selector, we look at the class selector, the ID selectors, combinators, pseudo class, pseudo elements. Now just a quick note. I said always remember selector, property, and value when you think of CSS. So let's get started by writing CSS codes. So now in VS Code, I'm going to show you guys real quick the various methods of adding CSS. Now, if I have something like H1 and inside of this H1 I have hello world. Now this is what I will do for inline CSS. It's just to come here and do style attribute. Then inside my style attribute, I will select the property and the value I need. So now what are properties? Properties are things that describes the element. Now, for instance, if I have something like color, I can do something like blue, receive, and all I need to do is to come here, right click, and open with live server. So guys, here we are on our browser. This live server running. If you remember closely, we did h1 tag and we gave a style attribute, giving a property of color and a value of blue. So let's head over to VS Code and continue. Now VS Code, I want to show you guys the internal CSS. Now all I need to do is to come back to the head and give a style tag. Now I'll follow the CSS syntax, which says that selector curly bracket property column value. So this is the syntax for it. Misspelled property column value. This is syntax for it. Now all I need to do is to, okay, let me just do something like this: CSS syntax. Then let me make this a comment. You guys remember comments, so I will come over this shortly. Now all I need to do is to do something like I will use my element as a selector. I have element selector. I will come to that shortly. and I will say color should be green. If I do this, so let's head over to our browser. Now on our browser, this is what we get. We are still having blue. I will tell you the reason shortly. So let's head over to VS Code. Let me show you some things. Now, inline CSS is kind of stronger than internal CSS. So let me comment this guy. Oh no, let me just remove this guy and save. So by the time I go back to my browser, you notice that the color is now green. So let's go back to VS Code. I'll explain something to you guys real quick. So let me just do Ctrl Z. I would love that guy to still be there. Then let me duplicate this. Then remove the styling on one of them. Let me just remove the second one. Then I'll comment the first one. Okay, now good. Let me show you guys the external CSS. So all I need to do is to comment this guy and head over to my directory. Then all I need to do is to create a CSS file. So let me say style.css. Now, if you remember closely, when I was explaining at first, I did something like link rel equal to style sheet href equal to style.css. Now, what this guy is doing is that it is pointing to the external CSS file on this same directory. Then if I had something like a CSS folder, all I need to do is just to do something like CSS slash. But since there is no CSS folder or subfolder, all I need to do is just to remove this guy and go with the style of CSS. So by the time I come here and do something like h1, which is my selector, and I give a property of color, and I set this to red, I watch what I will get when I get to my browser. Now my browser, this is what I'm getting. The hello world is now in red color. So let me go back real quick to VS Code and explain something to you guys. Now, it is important to know that in terms of power, the inline CSS is stronger than internal CSS, and internal CSS is stronger than the external CSS. If you remember closely, when I did both the inline and internal CSS, the inline CSS was standing out. So I want to do something. Let me show you the internal and the external. So if I save this, both of them are running. If I come back to my CSS, you see this color red here inside this HTML file, which is internal CSS. You can see color green. So let me go back to my browser. You notice that the green one is outstanding. So that's to tell you that inline CSS is stronger than internal CSS, and internal CSS is stronger than external CSS. So let's go over to VS Code and do some more things. Now, real quick, guys, let me talk about comments. Like you've seen comments already. So in CSS, the way we do comments is by doing something like this: forward slash asterisk. Our comment goes in asterisk again, then forward slash. So this is how we write the CSS comment. Like we said, when we're doing HTML, comments are not executed by the browser. They're just ways of explaining our code so that in a later time when we're looking at the code, it will be easier to understand. So that's what comment does. So just like I did on my HTML crash course, I'll be using comment to write out every subtopic I'm teaching. So let's head over to a PowerPoint. Let me show you something on selectors. Now, like I said, we've looked at this slide before. We have a selector, property, and value. Now, element selector is what I just did. Element selector is done using the name of the element or the name of the tag, then give your property and value. So if I head over to VS Code, something like this is an element selector, whereby I did something like h1, which is the name of the tag, then give my property and value. Now, there are different properties. I have color, I have background color, font size, font family, and all of that. So let me head over to my PowerPoint slide again. Now, class selector. How are class selector done? Class selectors are done using by giving a class attribute to the HTML element. So if I head over to VS Code, all I need to do is to do something like just to come down here and do something like a class. Then after this, I will do something like let me see HADING. I'm just giving a heading class. It's not ideal. So I come back to my, I want to comment this guy. I don't want to use all of this again. So let me make use of my external style sheet. If I come back to my style.css, all I need to do in order for me to select that guy is just to do something like dot heading, and I'll give it a background color of red. So this is another property. So by the time I save and head over to my browser, Notice that this is what I'm getting. Let's go over to VS Code and see the reason why it didn't work. So if I come back to VS Code, I think it's because I misspelled heading. So if I save this and go over to my browser again, what I will get. So this is the background color running. Now, real quick, let's go over to PowerPoint and look at some more stuff. Now, on PowerPoint, the next thing I want to talk about is the ID selector. Now, what is ID selector? Like I said, ID selectors are done by giving an ID attribute to the HTML element. So if I head over to VS Code, all I need to do is just to come back here and change this class to an ID. So by the time I say ID, then go over to my style.css. Now, real quick, classes are selected by using the period or the dots. So for IDs, I use the hash symbol or the number symbol. So all I need to do is to say hash heading. Then all I need to do is to say something like, I don't want to give a background color again. Let me do something. Okay, let me give background color. Background color, but this time I'll give a blue background color. So by the time I save and head over to my browser, you notice that this color is now blue. So that's for that. Then on my PowerPoint slide, the next thing I have here is combinators. Now, what are combinators? Combinators are done by combining two or more selectors. So if I come back to VS Code, now my VS Code, this is what I would do if I want to talk about combinators. Go back to my index.html. I can now do something like, let me say paragraph, then I'll do something like, let me say, welcome to CSS course. So if I save this, now watch what I will do. I don't need this. Okay, let me just comment this guy. Okay, let me give another H1. Something like CSS crash course. So if I save this, head over to my CSS. So I want to talk about combinators. Now for combinators, I have a heading which is H1, and I also have a paragraph. So this is combinators. By combining two selectors, so I need to do is to give them something like a background color of red. So if I save this and head over to my browser, this is what I'm getting. Good. So this is a combinator, selecting two selectors. Now, combinators are not just limited to elements alone. I can select both an element and a class and an ID. So if I go back to my VS Code, I want to do that real quick. Now, VS Code, I can decide to do something like this. So let me just uncomment this guy. Uncomment this guy. I'll change this to LOCSS to differentiate it. So LOCSS. So if I save this, let me remove this style attribute. It's no longer needed. So it is no longer needed. So if I save this, let me give it a class of heading. Take note, I can give both of them the same class name. So if I come back to CSS, I can now do something like this, comma, and say dot heading to select the class. Now say comma, then hash heading to select the ID. So by the time I save this and head over to my browser, so you can see this is what I'm getting. So these are our combinators. So guys, let's go over to our PowerPoint slide and look at something else. Okay, now the next on my list is pseudo class. Now, what are pseudo class? Now, when we talk about pseudo class, we're talking about a first class or a first property. Now, there are sometimes on our websites we might see a link, then the link will be, let me say, white in color. By the time our mouse move past the link, it will change to something like red or green. So those are examples of pseudo class. So let me just go back to my VS Code and show you guys real quick. Now VS Code, how would I do pseudo class? So come back here. Now still on this guy. So let me just take only the paragraph. So I can add the pseudo class, which is the first class. I can say p hover. Then I'll set the background color to blue when I hover past it. So if I save this and go back to my browser, notice that by the time I'm passing this, it will change to blue color. So this is an example of a pseudo class. So take note. So guys, real quick, the next on our list is pseudo element. Now, what are pseudo elements? Pseudo element is a keyword that is added to a selector that lets you style a specific part of the selected element. Now, for instance, I may have an HTML element. Let me go over to VS Code. I may have an HTML element and I want to style a specific part of the element. Now, what I would do, maybe either the first line or the paragraph, what I will use is a pseudo element. Now, how is pseudo element written? Now, if I come back to my HTML element, now let me target this each one. Okay, I have more than one each one. So let me target the paragraph. Now, if I want to target the paragraph, I can do something like P column column. Now you see different things. I have first line, first letter, and the rest of them. So let me go to first letter so that you see something. Now for this first letter, I can set properties of color to red. Now let me go over to my browser. If I go back to my browser, this is what I'm getting. Notice that the first alphabet there is red. That W, if you look at it, is very small. So I'll go back and I'll remove the background color, or let me give it a different style, or let me add more properties to it. So if I go back to my VS Code, this is what I would do. Let me add more properties. I can do something like font size. Let me set the font size to be 50 pixel. Then if I save, I don't want this color to be red again. Let me do something like white so that it will stand out. So by the time I save and go over to my browser, this is what you notice. So that's the first letter there. Now if I go back to VS Code, if for instance my paragraphs are, let me say I have a lot of words on that paragraph. Let me go back to my index.html. I had no words to it. So now what I'll do real quick, I will make use of my lorem ipsum. I guess you remember the lorem ipsum. So if I say lorem and I press enter, I save this. What I need to do, I want to take another example of the pseudo stuff, of the pseudo elements. So what I will do now is this: I will remove this guy. Okay, let me remove this one. Let me comment this guy out. Now, the shortcut for comment is control and forward slash, like we did before when we were doing HTML. So I can do something like P, then double colon, I will say first line. Now for the first line, I can set the color to be white. Let me make it standard. Now watch what will happen. By the time I save and go back to my browser, this is what I'm getting. The first line of that paragraph is now white in color. So that's for pseudo element. So let me go back to VS Code and show you guys something real quick. VS Code, what do I want to do again? So guys, real quick, let me talk about the difference between the pseudo class and the pseudo element. Now the first difference you notice is that for a pseudo class, it has just one single column, while for a pseudo element it has a double column. Now let me show you another example of a pseudo class. I can have something like each one. Now I'll say column, I'll say first type of. Remember, we have more than one h1 there. Now for the first type of, I can set the background color to be green. If I save this and head over to my browser, this is what you notice. Now the first type of my h1 element are now green. So that's another example of a pseudo class. I'm gonna go back to VS Code and explain this real quick. And like I said, one of the key differences is that for a pseudo class, it has just a single column. While for pseudo element, they have double column. So that's one of the difference. And again, pseudo class talks about properties that are supposed to be there but they are not there. For instance, when we talk about the over state, it only comes up when we mouse over the elements. Now let me take you guys back to biology real quick. If you remember very well in biology, there's something called pseudopodia that is also known as pseudopods, and it means first leg or first feet. And these are cell extensions that helps in movement and food capturing. So let's leave biology and come back to development. Now for pseudo element just talks about a keyword from the element that has been added to the selector when you are styling it in order for you to style part of the element. So that's that about the difference of pseudo class and pseudo element. We'll see them more as we advance through the course. So guys, let's talk more about CSS properties and value, because since the start of this course I've only been explaining selectors and the rest of them. I think I already talked about these three properties: background color, font size, and the rest of them. I didn't really hit on them. So I will head over to my index.html. I want to comment this. I won't be deleting it so that you guys will see them on my GitHub repository. Now I'll come back to my style.css. I'll also comment all of these guys. Let me comment all of them. Now just a quick one. All the topics, I think they kind of go together. But for a start, let me just put something like a comment and say CSS selector. Then come down here and talk about more properties and value. Let me say more CSS properties. and values. So come back to my index.html again. Then all I need to do is that I will bring a heading. Let me say h1. I'll say hello CSS. I'll see. Come back to my CSS. Now what I would do, I'll select this guy. I already know the meaning of selectors now. I'll say h1. Then if I do this, what I need to do is to add more properties and values. So let's talk about the color real quick. Now when we talk about color, color is the text color. That's to say the color you want the text itself to have. So if I say color to be red, you guys have seen that before. And I head over to my browser. This is what I will see. Now the color is red, so that's what the color does. The text color, that's what I want to do. So if I come back to my VS Code, what will I do next? Now there's nothing like text color. So if you want to select the text color, use color itself. Then I have background color is another property. So if I say background color, I can give it anything of my choice. Let me just say blue for instance. Uh, Trust me, these colors are not a very good color combination. I'm just doing this because of practice purpose. So you can see that the background color is now blue. Background color of that H1 element. So move over to VS Code again. So camera properties. Now, if I want to increase the size of the text, what I'll do is the font size. Font size is where we increase the size of the text. So there are different values. You have large, larger, medium, small, and the rest of them. But you can also use numeric values. I can do something like 12 pixel. No, 12 pixel will be very small. I can do something like 25 pixel. So let me do 25 pixel and save this. So by the time I save, oh, this is already a heading. So let me see what will happen. By the time I save and go back to VS Code, you can see that it's now smaller. So that's to say the default style is bigger than 25 pixel. So if I come back and let me increase the size, so let me see 100 pixel. I save this and go over to my browser. Notice that it's now big, like it's bigger than the way it was. So let me go back to VS Code and talk more about this. Now, if you look at real quick, I'm saying something like pixel. Now, pixel is just a unit for measurement in CSS. It's the default unit of measurement in CSS. The other unit, I have rems, em, those are responsive units. I have percentage, I have VW for width, I have VH for height. So we'll go over those guys shortly. So let's just continue. Now, I have font family. Now, what does font family do? Font family is used to change the font style. I think there's a property called font style in CSS as well. Font style. Okay, font style is used to give italic, bold, and the rest of them. So let's talk about font family first. Now, what does font family do? Font family is used to, give the particular font style you need. So let me just put it that way. So if I do something like sans serif, so if I do this and I save this, and by the time I head over to my browser, you notice that the text is now changed. Like this is not the same font style it has before. Now I'm speaking from an MS Word background. For MS Word, this is as font style. It means the style of the font. It's kind of confusing though, but let's just omit that. So in terms of web development, the font family is what is specifying the style of the font. So what does font style do? Font style is used to add style to it. Like I have italic or italic. So if I do this and I save, by the time I go back, I will have a slant text. So this is it. So if you remember very well, we can do this from our HTML. We talked about this. We can do something like em tag. So take note of that. Like we said, CSS can manipulate or can style HTML elements and change things about them. So take note. So whatever I can do in HTML, I can also do it with CSS. So let's continue. So let's talk about so guys, I think there's a shortcut I can use. Now in case I don't want to type out all of this, I can do something like font, then I will go with the weight first, which is now 100. Then I will go with the font style, which is italic, then I'll go with the font size, which is 100 pixel, then the font family, which is sans, then serif. Then if I save this and head over to my browser, you notice that I'm still getting the same thing. So this is something you can use instead of typing out all of those stuff. So let's head over to VS Code and look at this real quick. So I'll comment all of these. So that's what I will do. Now let's go over to other properties. I want to do something like a line height, but I can't do it here. So let me go back to my index.html. Then I'll bring the paragraph tag. inside of this paragraph, I will say lorem 200, let me say lorem 300. If I save this, then let me move this real quick. If I save this and go over to my browser, what do you notice? You notice that I'm having text. So what I want to do, I want to give more properties to this, something like line height or so. So if I head over to VS Code, on my CSS file, this is what I will do. Now let me target the paragraph, which is the p tag, and give it a line height. So if I do something like this, line height, and I see something like 5 pixel, if I save this and head over to my browser, this is what you notice. This is the line that I give. So now for things like line height, I think the m's and the rems are the best value to use. So a line height of 5 is very small. So let's go back to VS Code and look at this real quick. Now VS Code. So let me do something like do something like 2em. Remember I said these are responsive values. So if I come back and this is what I'm getting. So this one's kind of bigger. So if I come back to VS Code again, this is what you notice. I can do something like 2 rems. It's also a responsive value. If I go back to my browser, I'll see it's also giving us a good result. Let me go over to VS Code again. Now for the rems and REMs, those are responsive values. They are used if you want to give a more responsive value or style to your element. So I won't really go into that. I will just stick to pixel and the few basic ones. So let's talk about something else. So guys, real quick, let's talk about CSS colors. Now for colors in CSS, there are different ways of adding colors. Now the first is that I can use color names just like a regular red, blue, green, and the rest of them. Then another way of adding colors is by using HTML5 special colors. There are some special colors that comes with HTML5, things like coral, tomato, and the rest of them. Then I have hexadecimal color values. Hexadecimal color values are done by using hash or number symbol, then adding 6 values to it. We'll look at those things shortly. We won't go back to our VS Code. Then we'll look at the RGB color, which stands for red, green, blue. So it's a mixture of red, green, and blue. Then we'll look at the RGB color. The RGBA color is an extension of the RGB color. So we just added an alpha value to it. Now, what alpha value does is that it does something like opacity. So we'll see that shortly when we go over to our VS Code. Then the last on our list is the HSL. And HSL stands for hue, saturation, and lightness. It's a kind of color that talks about color values ranging from 0 to 360. Where 0 is red, 120 is green, 240 is blue, then saturation is the percentage value where 0% means a shade of gray and 100% means a shade of full color. Now, we won't go into the HSL that much. We'll just talk about few of them, things like we're going to look at the first four. We'll look at the color names, HTML5 color names, as a decimal color value, RGB, rather the first five. So let's go over to our VS Code and actually get started doing something. On VS Code, what I will do is that in order for me to explain these colors, I think I will create a box. So let me go back to my index.html, do something like this. Let me create a div. I won't put anything inside of this div. So this will enable us to add more properties and the rest of them. Now if I come back to my CSS, I can target this div. Then let me put a comment here. Let me do something like CSS color. So if I come here now, I can do something like this. Now, in order for me to get something on my browser, I can do something like width. Let me set a width property of, let me say 300 pixels, so that I will get a box. And I will see something like height of another 300 pixels. So if I save this and head over to my browser, this is what I will get. Now my browser, this is what I'm getting. There's nothing here. The reason is because there is no color, but you can see that the width and the height has added something. So let me go over to VS Code and actually add color to it. Now VS Code, I can do something like background color. Remember, background color is the color of the box, not the text itself. So I can do something like red, which is a normal color name. So you guys have seen this before. So if I head over to my VS, to my browser, this is the red color. So that's that. So real quick, I want to remove some of this text. I think they are too much. Let me go over to my VS Code. Now, I'll go back to my Windows to HTML and remove some of this text. It's too much. Okay, so we're good to go. Still too much. Let me remove more. So if I save this now, come back to my browser. Okay, good. We are good to go now. Now let me go back to my VS Code. Now VS Code, I want to add a lot of stuff to this. So I gave this a width and height of 300 pixels each. Then I also give a background color. Now I want to talk more about the CSS color. Color names are your regular color names, which are the red, blue, and the rest of them. So that's for color names. Let me do something like this. Comment color names. Then let me talk about the HTML5 colors. So for HTML5 colors, this is what I will do. I'll do something like background color. I'll do something like tomato. So if you look at these special color names, these are HTML5 colors. So if I do this and I head over to my browser, you see that this is the color I'm having, tomato. So let me go back to VS Code and show you more of this color. Um, this one called Cora. So if I do something like this, Cora, Coral, and I see if it's similar to the tomato. By the time I go back to my browser, you can see what I'm getting. This for the Cora. So those are HTML5 colors. I will advise you to look at the W3 school for more of the colors. And let me go back to my VS Code. Let me talk about the hexadecimal color values. X color values. Now for hexadecimal color values, I see down hexadecimal color values. Let me just do background color. I see down hexadecimal color values done by putting a number symbol or a hash. Then what I will do is that if you take up six values, now these six values will determine the colors I'm getting. If I'm having six zeros and I go back to my VS Code, this will give me a black color. So that's what I'm getting. So I go back to my VS Code. If I'm having six Fs, 1, 2, 5, 6. Okay, if I save this and go back to my browser, this is what I'm getting to give me a white color. Now, because my background is already white, you can't see it. So let me go back to VS Code and target my body elements. Let me just go up real quick and do this over here. So I can select the body, so I give a background color of gray. Let me save this. I head over to my VS Code, so to my browser. I can see what I'm getting. This is the white color. So if I go back to VS Code, let me talk more about this. Now, let me comment this guy. Now again, it is important to know that hexadecimal color values only have digit ranging from 0 to 9 and alphabet ranging from A to F. So for instance, if I come here and I try to put a random color, let me say F, 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 and I say something like Y, Z, it won't work. This is not a value, it's a decimal color value. It only ranges from the real numbers, which are 0 to 9, and alphabet ranging from A to F. So if I do something like this, A, 5, 6, A5, 6, 7, 8, F, I see that this is giving me valid color. By the time I go back to VS Code, you see that this is what I'm getting. Now, I won't waste much of our time on hexadecimal color value. So, if you want to get more colors, you can go to in the W3 schools. You see hexadecimal color values for other different things, maybe for the HTML5 colors and the rest of them. It all depends on you and whichever one you like. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to cram all of these hexadecimal color values. No, that doesn't make you a better developer. What makes you a better developer is that you know what to use and how to use it and where to get what you want to use. So that's for that. So, guys, let me go back to so let me show you something real quick. Now, if I have six color values, let me say F, F, F into six places. Now, there's something I can do. Instead of writing out the CSS, I can decide to use theory of it. So, when I go back to my browser, notice that this white color, because of the white background color, you can't see it. So, if I head over to VS Code and I decide to change this back to, let me say, 000. Remember, six zeros will give me black. So, three zeros will also give me black. When I come back to my browser, notice that this is what I'm getting. So, that's what about hexadecimal color value. So, next on our list is the RGB color value. So let me see the PowerPoint slide. RGB color values. Now what are RGB color values? Now for RGB is just talking about emission of red, green, and blue. Now if I come back, I can do something like RGB color values. And if I save this, it's talking about emission of red, green, and blue. So let me do something like this: background color. And I can say RGB. Now whereby was okay. Let me see red, green, and blue. So this is what it means. So this is not a valid color value. So let me just comment this as. I'm just trying to show you guys. So if I duplicate this and then uncomment this, now the first value will be for my red. So if I do something like let me see 10, my second value will be for green. Let me see 20. Then my third value will be for blue. Let me see 30. If I save this, I can see that this is giving me black color. So then I come back to my browser. This is what you notice. It's not a black color though. I can see I'm not that good with colors. So if I come back to my browser, something I can do. Now let me just show you the basic ones which are black and white. Now 0, 0 and 0 will give me black. So if I do 0, 0, 0 to give me black, then I come back to my browser, I'm getting this black. So take note. So if I come back to VS Code, what do I do to get white? Now as a decimal color values ranges from 0 to 255. That's to say for the red, it has color values ranging from 0 to 255, 0 to 255, 0 to 255. So if I want to get a white color value, I can say 255, sorry, 255. I'll come back here. I'll say 255, come back here, 255. By the time I save this and come back to my browser, this is what I'm getting, white color. So let me just show you how to get yellow real quick. Okay, you saw it just now. So if I make this guy to be 0, you can see that I'm getting a yellow color value. There's no need of going back to the browser and coming back again. So take note. So if I want to get only red color value, you just to give this a color of red, 255, then 00. This will give me red. Then if I want to get blue, rather green, just to come back and do something like this, 255. So this will give me green. So if I come back here, if I want to get blue, just to say 255, this will give me blue. Now real quick, let me show you something from the hexadecimal color values. If I want to get red, I can do something like 00FFFF. So this will give me blue. So 00FF00 will give me blue. It will give me green. And if I want to get red, I will increase the value of um this. So this will give me red. So take note. So the F is like the increased value, while 0 is the lowest value. If I do something like this, 00, then I come back here and I do something like FF, this will give me a blue color. So take note of that. So in all of them, you can see I'm getting a red. So in other words, if I want to classify the RGB color value, I can see this is something like this. Background color. Sorry, my hexadecimal color value. I can see something like background color. So I'll say ash, red, green, blue. So please take note of this. Take note of this. It's very important. Then now let's talk about the RGB color value. Like I said, RGBA color values is an extension of the RGB color value. Now, the only difference is that it comes with an extra guy, which is the alpha value, which is like in form of an opacity. So if I say background color, everything is the same with the RGB. So even if I decide to come back here and copy this and paste this guy here, this is what I will get. This is giving me the same thing. But now for RGB, all I need to do is to add this alpha color value, which will stand as an opacity. So if I want something like, I can say 0.5, by the time I save and I head over to my browser, this is what you take note of now. It's not kind of like, now in most cases I always use RGB color value to bring out glass effect. Now let me just show you something real quick. If for instance, let me just show you something that will trick you. If I say body, for instance, then inside this body I give you background color of, let me say blue, for instance, and this is what I will do. Let me just put the body above this. I'm going to remove it, but let me just put it above. So I say body background color of blue, then I give this div a background color of RGBA, and I change this to let me see. Remember, this is blue color. Don't forget. Then alpha value now. Let me increase this to 9. Then I come back here. I say div column over. Remember we talked about pseudo earlier. I can bring this guy and put this right here. Then after that, I can reduce the alpha value. Just watch what I will get. If I do this like 0.5, then I save and I head over to my browser. Just notice what will happen. You can see this. My bad. Okay, let me go back to my browser again. Now, the reason we can't see this is because this thing is too close. So let me just change this guy to something like okay, I think I can select from it. Let me just leave this guy, something like this. So if I save this and go back to my browser, so by the time I see what I'm getting. So I use this mostly whenever I want to give a glass effect. So we'll see that when we get to our project. So let's go over to our VS Code. Now VS Code, what did I want to talk about again? So I talked about the box. So this is the box. Okay, the last color value, which is HSL. Now for the HSL, it's a little bit advanced. So like I said, there is no special one to use. Like you are not constrained to use anyone. You are free to use anyone of your choice. So let's just omit the HSL and HSL. I think there's another one called HSL. So let's just focus on the basics. Now, let me just show you guys something real quick. If you look at this thing, I gave a width and a height. So I want to talk about something on this div again. So what I will do, I will delete this guy. I don't need it. Then I will have to copy this out. Then comment this. Then I'll comment this, comment this as well. So let me talk about this div again. If you remember closely, I gave a width and a height attribute. So the other attributes I can give. So I can do something like if I want to get a circle, I can do something like border radius. I will set this to 50%. So if I save this and head over to my browser, this is what I will get. Okay, there's no color. So let me go back to my VS Code and add the color to it. So if I come back here, and something like background color, red. I don't know why I'm using red today. So if I go back to browser, I can see it has given me a circle, but this will be our next topic or our next subtopic. So let me go back to my VS Code. So let me comment this guys out real quick. Okay, no need of commenting it out. Let me just comment these two out, or let me delete them. Then so guys, real quick, let's go over to our slide and look at the next subtopic. Now, next on our list is CSS bus model. Now, what does CSS bus model do? Now, CSS bus model is that part of CSS that tells us that everything on our web page is a box. Now, what do I mean by that? Now, if I go back to my browser, this is what you notice. On my browser, this is what you notice. Notice that if I right click and inspect this, now, if you look at this thing closely, these are the elements. By the time I pass through anyone, you see a box around it. So that's what CSS box model is telling us. It's telling that anything that is on our web page is seen as a box. Now it comes with three things, which are padding, border, and margin. So if we head over to the PowerPoint slides, this is what we get now. If you look at this picture very well, you notice something. You see margin, top border, top padding, right, bottom, and the left. So what are those things? Let's go over to VS Code and let's talk about them real quick. Now VS Code, what do we see? Now, if you remember closely, the last time I did something like a border radius. Now, what is a border? A border is like a box that is surrounding our element. So if I say something like border 1 pixel, solid red. So let me save this and go back to my browser. And this is what I'm getting on my browser. So this is for that box. Okay, good. This is what I'm looking for. Now this margin for the particular, okay, for this particular element I've just selected. So this will be our margin. Then this is the border of it. Then this is the padding and internal space. Okay, we'll look at it shortly. Now for this particular element, so I can do something like this. I'll look for the particular element I'm working on. So that's my paragraph. No, this is the div. Good. And if I click on this, um, okay, because there are no content, it won't be able to. I can't be able to open it. So let me explain this using this paragraph. I come back to the paragraph. This is what is happening. So you can see different things, padding, margin, and the rest of them. So the text is the content. So let me just explain using this. So let me not bore you guys with this. If I remove this guy. Now, if you remember closely, what I did on VS Code, let me go over to VS Code. What I did on VS Code was that I gave a property called border and I set the value to be 1 pixel solid and red. Just like we did when we were doing font style, these are combination of properties. So if I comment this, I can do something like border width. I can do something like 1 pixel. I'll come down and say um, border style. So border style, there are different values. I have dash, dotted, and the rest of them. But in most cases, if you want to use solid, I can come back here and say color. My border color, I can set this to red. By the time I save this and head over to my browser, notice that I'm getting the same value. So that's what that guy is doing. It's a combination of three different properties. So instead of me to write this out, I can try to do a shortcut by saying border alone. Now I say 1 pixel solid red. Right over to my browser, you can see that it's giving me the same result. So guys, let's head over to VS Code real quick and talk about the margin and padding. Now what is margin and padding? Now both margin and padding are talking about spaces. But the difference is that padding is an internal space while margin is an external space. Now if you look at this div, it just contains this text and we've added border to it. So let's talk about padding for this. If I say padding, I can do something like 20 pixel. By the time I save and head over to my browser, this is what you notice. There's now a space inside. So you see within the border and the text content, that's where the space is. So that's padding, talking about an internal space. Now let me go back to my VS Code and show you guys something real quick again. Now in VS Code, padding could take up different value. Now if I'm having a single padding or a single value for my padding, it will take up everything. Now both the top, right, left and bottom will have equal values. Just like we saw on the PowerPoint presentation. So if you remember, we talked about top padding, right padding from this picture. So let's go back to our VS Code and look at something real quick. Now VS Code, what I will do is that I want to talk about different values. Like I said, if you are given a single values for everywhere around the element. So if I do something like two values, let me say 20 pixel, 40 pixel. Now what this thing is doing is that 20 pixel is for top and bottom, then 40 pixels for left and right. If I go back to my browser, this is what you notice. For top and bottom is 20%. Now because my text content is small, that's why you are seeing it like this. So let me head over to VS Code. Now VS Code, let me change this text to lorem 90. By the time I remove this and do something like lorem 90, if I save and head over to my browser, this is what I'm getting. So at least to some extent this is reasonable. Let me go back to my VS Code again, and then let me go back to my CSS and do some style. Now if I do this, you notice that 20 pixels for top and bottom and 40 for left and right. Now if I decide to increase this to 50 and let me see 50 comma 30, if I do this and I say go back to my browser, what do you notice? The 50 pixels for top and bottom, then the other one is for left and right. So that's for that. Then real quick, let me show you something. If you look at this text, notice that it's not well arranged. So there's a property I can use. So I can do something like text align. Let me just show you this real quick before we continue the box model. I can do something like text align to center. And if I do text align to center, what will this give me? All the text will be at the center of that particular element. So let me come back to my VS Code again. I say something like text align of left, that's the default one. So if I do something like text align of right and I save, come back to my browser, this is what I'm getting. We will align to the right hand side. So lastly, the one I like using, I can do something like text align of justify. So by the time I save and head over to my browser, this is what you notice. So everything is well arranged. I like using this one a lot. So let me go back to my VS Code and let's continue. Now that's all about padding if it's taking two values. Now, what if my padding is taking three values? Let me say 50 pixel, 30 pixel, and 80 pixel for instance. Now this is what you take note of. This first value is for top, the second value is for left and right, while the third value is for bottom. By the time I go back to my browser, this is what you notice. Can you see what is happening? So my top value was set to 50, left and right was set to 30, and bottom was set to 80. So this one is bigger. So take note of that. So by the time I come back to VS Code, Let me talk about four values. What if it's taking four values? Let me say 50, 30, 80, and let me say 100 pixel. Time I save this now. What is happening here is that 50 pixel is on top, 30 pixels for right, 80 pixel bottom, 100 pixel left. Now this is like a clockwise direction. It's going into now this is following the clockwise direction. Now if I save this and go back to my browser, this is what you take note of. This is what you notice. This is the 50 pixel, the 30, the 80, and the 100. So that's for that for padding. So like I said, padding is an internal space. Now what about margin? Now if I come back to VS Code, what will margin do for me? Margin is used to give an external space. And still on this thing, I can do something like margin. Now when I say margin and I say something like 50 pixel, what should will happen? By the time I save this and head over to my browser, this is what you should take note of. Now this is now pushed away from the side of this web page. That's to say margin is an external space. And if you notice very well, this thing is coming down than the way it was. Now for us to understand margin very well, okay, let me just go back to VS Code and show you something. So just like for padding, it can also take for values. So remember one value is for everywhere. And if I do something like two values is for top and bottom, while second value is for left and right. Then three value top, left and right and bottom, while for four values top, right, bottom and left. So take note. So if I do something like 50, 30 pixel, let me just give you the same value, 30 pixel, 80 pixel, and 100 pixel, and I save this. Now what will happen? By the time I go back to my browser, you can see there's a little difference than the way it was before. Now, real quick, this is what I want to do. You can get the understanding of margin by using this. So what I like using when explaining margin is that margin is talking about the space of an element from its next element. Let me put it that way. Now, if for instance on my VS Code, if I go to my index.html and I have, let me see, now let me say I have four divs. No, I don't want to use div because I already have div on my web page. Let me use a semantic tag. Let me use section for instance. If I have section, and I say lorem 200, what should will happen? No, 200 is too much. Let me say lorem 100. And what should will happen? Come back here and I decide to duplicate this. Let me bring 5 of it, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I save this and head over to my browser, this is what you notice. I'm having 5 of this section. Let me go back to CSS and start there. Let me show you more explanation of padding and margin. Now remember, if I say section, this is an element selector. To select all of the section tag, I can give a border of 1 pixel solid black. So if I save this and head over to my browser, what will you notice? This is what I'm getting, right? So that's the border. So take note. So if I go back to VS Code, I want to give a padding so that you notice the difference. And if I say padding, I say padding to 30 pixel uniform, a uniform padding. And if I save this and go back to my browser, what do you notice? Padding is an internal space. If you look at this element, they are still close to each other, but within the element, that's to say between the border and the text content itself, you can see a space there. That's padding for all of them. Then let's talk about margin now. Margin is an external space, like I said, that will push the element away from its next element. So if I say something like margin, I can do something like 30 pixel again. So by the time I save and go over to my browser, this is what you should take note of. You can see that they are now pushed away from each other and even from the side of the screen or from the side of the browser. Now let me go back to VS Code and show you guys something real quick. Now VS Code, this is what I want to show you. Remember this from this previous one I did something like padding. I was saying something like top left, bottom and right. Now you can also specify them. You can do something like padding top, padding left, padding bottom, padding right, so you can see them here. You can also do that for margin. I can say margin left, margin bottom, margin right, and all of that. So the next property I want to talk about real quick, I've talked about it before, but I'll just look at it again, is the border radius. Now when I give a border radius, a border, I can also give a border radius. I can do something like border radius, and I can do something like 3 pixel. Now border radius give this soft edge. And if I come back to my browser, this is what you see. So for border radius of 10, this thing is no longer sharp. It's now a bit curved. Let me go back to VS Code and give you a more obvious value. So let me say border radius of 10 pixel. By the time I save this, go back to my browser, this is what I'm getting. So 10 pixels kind of curve, recurve. So take note. So there are different values for this border radius again. I can do something like border top right radius, border top left radius, border bottom left radius. So if I say border, so you can see them border top left, border top right, border bottom left. If I come down, you see a lot of them. So border bottom right. So you can do them on your spare time. So for now, I'll leave them. So like I said, if I want to form a circle, is by giving a width and a height that are equal in value. Then after doing that, I will set border radius to 50%. So that's that about CSS box model. We'll look at it properly or we apply them when we get to our CSS project. So let's look at the next topic. So guys, real quick, let's talk about styling a link or an anchor tag. Now, I didn't mention this at first. It is important to know that every element that comes into our web page or tag that comes into the web page comes with some default styling, some margin and padding and the rest of them, but we won't talk about that much. Now, for an anchor tag, the styles are so obvious. Now, if I come back to my index.html and I do something like this, I say anchor tag. Inside of this, I say something like click me. I save this and head over to my browser. This is what I will get. So this is the link down here. Click me. Now, what are the styles of a link? By default, a link comes with a color of blue and it is underlined. And the hover state of a link has a cursor of pointer. Also, the active state of a link has a color of red. If I click on this, it flashes real quick. You see a color of red. So that's the active state of a link. Then the visited state of a link has a color of purple. Now this thing is purple in color because I visited it. And if I come back to my VS Code, let me show you some things I can do. If I come back to my style.css, I can come down here and do something like this. Anchor, I will set the color to black. Now if I do this and set the text decoration to none, so text decoration, there are different things I can do. Dash, dotted, double, line through and the rest of them. So for now, let me set the text decoration to none. If I do this and I save, if I go over to my browser, this is what I will get. It's now dark in color and there's nothing there. So let me do something about the state of a link. Now let me talk about the active state of a link. I would rather the over state. If I see a column over pseudo-class, remember guys, I can see the color. I want it to show by when I hover through this link, I want it to be, let me say I want it to be blue in color. Then let me talk about the visitor state. If I see a colon visited, I want this to be okay. No, let me not show you. So if I do color of blue and I head over to my browser, this is where you notice active. Okay, over state rather. So you can see when I pass through it, it's now blue in color. So that's the over state of a link. And if I come back to my browser, let me talk about the visited state. Now for visited state, because I've visited this link, what should happen? I say a colon visited. And if I do this, I can do something like color to be green. And if I do this and say go back to my browser, this is what you notice. See, this is green in color. So take note. Now I can style a link to look like a button. So let me go back to VS Code and show you this real quick. Now what do I do? If I come back here, let me show you something. Let me just put a button so that I see the styles of link and button. And if I say button and I do something like click me, I save this and head over to VS Code. This is what you notice. A button has this border around it by default and the rest of them. But the difference is that the cursor of a button is an arrow, while for that of a link is a pointer. So let me come back to VS Code and do some stuff real quick. Now I said I want to style this link so that it will look like a button. If I come back to my CSS, it's very easy just by doing something like for the link, I will say something like border. I can add the border of 1 pixel, solid, black. And I can add the border radius of 3 pixel. And I can as well add the padding. If I do padding, 5 pixel top and bottom, then 3 pixel left and right. If I do this and go back to my browser, This is what I will get. Oh, okay, it's not showing. What's happening? Maybe I didn't save. Let me go back to my VS Code. So, for my solid, I didn't spell my solid correctly. That's LID. So if I do this and go back to my browser, this is what I'm getting. So boom. So this is a link. It's not like a button. So take note. Let's go back to VS Code and do some more stuff. Now, what did I want to talk about again? Let's talk about list styles. Now, I will go over to my HTML file. I'll just grab all of this stuff. So let me just grab the UL. How do I style a list? Now, it's important to know that by default, lists come into our web page with some default padding. So if I paste this guys here and I say my favorite knight of Camelot, Arthur, Lancelot, I'm going Lancelot, my best. Woo! If I come back to my VS Code, so this is what I'm getting. It's coming with some bulletins by default. So and also it's also coming with some padding. So look at this place very well. You see space there. Now let me go back to my VS Code and show you guys something real quick. So by default, whenever I want to start any CSS styling, this is what I normally do. I will strip out all the initial padding and margin that comes with all the elements by doing something like this. Asterisk, which is a universal selector. I didn't mention this at first. I do something like padding, 0 pixel, then margin, 0 pixel. By the time I save and go back to my browser, so this is what I'm getting. So there's no padding and margin on anything, no default padding and margin. These ones are only having padding and margin because I set them under. So take note of that. So this is a good coding practice if you want to start a project. It's better to remove all the padding and margin that comes by default and start working with the ones you want to add. But for now, let's go back and remove this real quick. I just want to show you guys something. Now, I'll comment this. If I come downstairs, this is what I want to do. What I want to do downstairs. So for my UL, I can set the background color to red. So what should happen? So I set everything under the UL tag. So if I come back, this is what I'm getting. So this is the padding I'm telling you about from here to here. So take note of that. So let me head over to my VS Code. Let me show you something real quick. I don't need this background color. I just wanted to show you guys something. Then now I can do something like list style or list style type. So if you can see I have different value, Meridian, cycle, decimal, and the rest of them. But I like setting it to null for the most part. So if I save this and head over to my browser, you see there are no list styles again. So take note of that. Then if I come back to my VS Code, I can also do something like list style type and none. It will still do the same thing. If I do this and head over to VS Code, to my browser, this is what you notice is also working. So let me head over to my VS Code. Now I can also target the LIs. I can do something like ULLI, give the list type to none or the list type to none. So take note. Then now I want to talk about some of the pseudo class we talked about earlier. Now I have something like ULLI. This is uh, so this is me being specific. I didn't talk about this when I was doing selector. Forget. So this is me being specific. I want to select all the airlines that are under UL. And let me just show you this real quick. If I come back to my web page, good. I'm glad I remember this. If I do something like airline and I say hello today, if I save this and head over to my browser, notice that I have that hello today there as a list. Look at the bulletin. Now, if I come back to VS Code, I want to show you something again. If I want to be specific in my selection or specific on my selection, this is what I will do. I can say ULLI. I can set the background color to red. Now, what will happen? This will affect all the airlines that are under the UL, but not the one outside the UL. If I come back, you can see that all of them are having this, but this one is not having it. So this is me being more specific in order of selection. So take note. There's more to selection. You really can't learn everything here. So I would advise you to study on your spare time, search for materials and the rest of them. So on VS Code, so this is what I want to do. I don't need this guy. I just wanted to show you something. That's me, aspect of me being specific on my selection. So now my style of CSS. So guys, real quick, let me talk about more pseudo class. Now for these links, I can do something like ULLI column first child. And if I do this and I do something like background color red, if I do this and go back to my browser, now you can see that okay, this is not coming out as red. What's wrong? Let me go back and do something again. Let me try last child. I come back and do something like last child, and I see hand over to my browser. Okay, the last child is working. I think I know why the first child is not working. Now the first child is not working because I'm having a history there. So let me just comment this history out, then come back to this place again. Let me do something like first child. By the time I see I hand over to my browser, you can see that it's working so good. So that's how to do more pseudo class. I think there's something I can do end child and give value. So let me come back to this place and add more list elements. So I'll just duplicate these guys real quick. So if I save this and then over to my VS Code, I can do something like li, then I'll say end child of even. I'll do something like end child, then I'll say even. If I do this, um, head over to my okay, this is what I'm getting even. So all of them that are even 3, 2, 4, 6, and the rest of them. If I come back to my VS Code, something I can also do, I can say, so let me just pick this guy. Then I'll say inside of all. Let me say this to blue. If I say blue and I say all over to my browser, this is what I'm getting. So this is good if you have dynamic content that are coming into the web page. If you can't keep track of the numbers, so you can set one to even, one to odd. So let's go over to VS Code and let me show you some more stuff. Now VS Code, I want to comment this and show you something. Even with this pseudo class, I can do something like UL, LI, colon, end child. I can specify a value, end child of one. Of course, that will give me the first one. So I can do something like background color of green. If I do this, sorry, if I do this and go back to my VS Code, this is what I'm getting. So that's what the first child will give me. So if I come back to VS Code again, I can do something like inside of four, so I can specify anything I want. So by the time I come back to my browser, see this is what I'm getting. So that's that about pseudo class. So like I said, there are more things to do. So let's head over to VS Code and look at something else. So guys, real quick, the next thing I will talk about is actually styling a table. So what happens is that I will head over to my HTML class and I will grab the table we used over there. So let me just come back to this place, then copy this table element we use. So this is I've copied it. So if I head over to my working file, I can paste this table right here. If I save, now don't forget we added a style here, something like width of 100%. So I want to remove that style, and let me actually target this from my CSS file. So I can use the selector table, and I'll see I want the width again to be 100%. And if I do this and head over to my browser, this is what I'm getting. The width is 100%. Now, if you notice, the style of the table head is it has a text align of center, while for the table data has text align of left. So I can decide to change that. So let me go over to VS Code and do that real quick. Now, in VS Code, I can do something like this: table row, comma table head, comma table data, and I'll do something like text align to center. If I save this and then over to my browser, you can see this is what I'm getting. So that's all about table style. I don't want to add things like colors and the rest of them. I think this style is manageable for now. So let me go back to VS Code and let's look at the next thing real quick. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is actually styling a form. So as usual, I will go back to my HTML and I will grab a form. So if you look at this place, this form is too long. So let me grab the one from the project we did. So this is the form we did. Okay, good. This form is small. So I'll grab this form. After grabbing this, I will take it to my working file. Then I will just add one field. There's something I omitted, something I forgot to talk about when we did the form. Was I forgot to talk about the text area field. All this text area is a field like an input field. But the difference is that it is used to take a large amount of text. Now let me show you how this is on the browser. Come back to my browser. This is what we're getting. So this is the text area. Now, okay, if you look at this, I have an H1 on my phone, so that's what is affecting it. So remember, I targeted on H1. So if I go back to VS Code real quick, let me remove this legend and fixes. So I don't need this. Now if I remove this and save, then what I will do is that I will, okay, let me show you how this is on the browser now. If I come back to my browser, okay, this is what I'm getting. Good. Now I still have something over there. So let me head over to VS Code real quick. This was happening. I added the fit set, so I think the fit set is what's bringing that line. So I want to remove the fit set. If I save this and head over to my browser, so this is what I'm getting. Good. Now I want to work on this form. How do I work on the form? If I want to style my form, I can come back to my style.css, then I'll say form and do something like background color to be red. So let me just show you this real quick to show that it's working. If I come back to my VS Code, to my browser, this is what I'm getting. So let me add restyles to the form now. Now I can do something like F1. So let me go back to my VS Code. Then this is what I will do. Now I can add a margin top on the form. I can do something like margin top. I'll say 20 pixel so that it will be moved away from the other element that's above it. And I'll remove this. Now what I like doing is that for form, you may want to set a width. You can say width of, let me say, 500 pixel. Then if I do this, what should I will get? Then let me do something like a border. Say 1 pixel solid black. Then I'll do something like border radius with 5 pixel. If I do this and head over to my browser, this is what I'm getting for my phone. Can you see it? Now again, remember these elements are inline by default, so take note. I didn't add the break tag, so I'll go over to my VS Code. I want to remove all of the break tag, so let me start this using CSS. So if I come back to my index.html, I want to remove the break tag. Then I also want to remove this BR tag so that everything will be inline by default. If I do this, save and go back to my browser, this is what I'm getting. Good. Everything are inline by default now. And let me head over to my VS Code and show you how to style this form real quick. Now for my form, I can do something like this. I'll say I want to target the form input. I want to set the display to be block. If I do this and I save, head over to my browser, this is what I will get. Display is block. So good. Something I can do again. If I head over to VS Code, I want to set a padding for my form. So I can do something like this padding. I'll set the padding to 20 pixel all around. If I save this, head over to my browser, this is what I'm getting. So this is what you see. So if I come back to VS Code, what can I do again? Let's just start this from real quick. Then I can do something like this. I can set the width of this to be 100%. Now what this 100% does is that it's taking 100% of its parent container. If I come back here, the parent container is a form. So this is what I'm getting. Boom. It is better this way. Now I will show you how to target this button separately. So let me go over to VS Code again. I'll show you something real quick. So I can do something like form input where the type is equal to submit. Good. I think this is a better way of doing it. So if I do this, I will say I don't want the width to be 100%. You just say width, then I'll do something like 200 pixel. So if I save this and head over to my browser, this is what I'm getting. So this is a button, so I can add more styles to it. Let me head over to VS Code again and do something like padding. And for padding, I can say 10 pixels so that it will be a bit big. Then I can set the cursor to pointer. Remember, it's an arrow by default, so let me say cursor pointer. If I save this, head over to my browser, this is what I'm getting. So good. So this is what I'm getting. Now let me go over to VS Code again. I'm sorry guys, it's taking time. Then this is what I want to do. So I can do combinators here. So I can say form input, comma. I'll say form text area. So this is what that work. Then I can also set the margin bottom to be 10 pixels so that there will be a little bit of space from the next element. So if I do this and I head over to my browser, this is what I'm getting. So good. It's a bit better. Then if I come back again, I don't like the way this thing is too close to it. So come back to my VS Code. This is what I can do. I can say form, and I will say label. Now for the form label, I can do something like margin top of, let me say, 20 pixel. If I do this Come back to my browser. This is what I will get. Form label. It didn't work. So let me go back to VS Code again and check why. So form label. Okay, the reason it's not working is because it is inline. So I should set display to block. So good. Before that will work. So if I come back to my browser now, you can see that it's working. So at least it's a bit better. Then let me come back to VS Code again and do something real quick. So for this, I can as well set a padding for my input. So the padding will also affect the text area, but nevertheless, that's no. Let me just say 10 pixel. If I do this, then I save. By the time I come back to browser, this is what I will get. This is what I will get. So you can see now this is now a bit bigger. Okay, this thing is overflowing. So how do I fix this? So let me head over to VS Code and do something like this. Let me reduce the width of this to, let me say, 90%, and I'll see. If I head over to my browser, this is what I'm getting. Okay, it's not good. Let me still do something. Let me leave this as uh, okay. Let me just say 97%. So let me just do this. If I come, so here we are on VS Code. So this is what I'm getting. Okay, what if I increase the padding of the form? So let me just come back here and increase the padding of the form. So let me say 30 pixel. So if I save this, head over to my browser, this is what I'm getting. Okay, it's a bit manageable. So for my form, this button, I want it to be at the center. I don't want it to be there. Now, if I want to take the button to the center, this is what I will do. Just to come back here and do something like this. There are different ways I can do. I can do text align center, but I think the best way, if you already give a width to the element or to the button, what you do is just to say margin and set the margin to auto. So this will push it to the center. By the time I come back to my browser, this is what I'm getting. Can you see it? So take note. So it's too close to the other one. So let me just come back to my VS Code. Now there are two ways of doing this. I can decide to target the text area and give it a margin button. So let me just say margin bottom of 10 pixel. I save this. Okay, I think this will fix that. So browser good. This is what I'm getting. So that's it for styling the form, guys. I know this style is not that good, but when we start doing projects, we see better styles. So guys, real quick, the next thing we want to talk about is the CSS layout and positioning. So let's start with the layout. Now let me head over to my PowerPoint slide. Now what does CSS layout do? CSS layout is that part of CSS that tells us how we lay out the structure of our website. Now if you go to some website, you see some things at the left, some at the right, and all of that. So CSS layout is that part of CSS that will tell us how to do that. Now, there are different ways of doing CSS layout. I have float, flexbox, and grid. Now, for the sake of this tutorial, just to keep things very simple, we're going to talk about the float. Now, there are advanced tutorials for flexbox and grid. So, what I'll do is that I will teach the floats. Then, during the course of the project we'll be doing, I will talk about a little of the flexbox and also explain some of the grid. That's if time will permit. Now, float is the other way of doing things. So, like I said, that's what I'll show you guys. Then let me show you something on my slide again. Now, this is what I was talking about, how to arrange your websites whereby I will have some things at the left, a main and a side, and the rest of them. So that's what CSS layout does. So let's head over to our VS Code. Now, VS Code, what did I want to do? Now, I want to add contents to my web page so that we talk about the CSS position. Now, what I'll do is that I'll come down and I'll do something like a div. And I'll say lorem to no 200 similar 100 and save this. I'll come back and duplicate this text. Now how do I duplicate this? Just to copy and paste twice. So if I do this and I save, then if I head over to my browser, this is what I will get my browser. So these are the text. Okay, now because I have a div that has been styled, so that's why it's affecting it. So I'll go back to VS Code and I will change this to section, or I can apply a class to it. But for now, I don't want to apply a class. I just want to let me do something like a section. If I duplicate. Now what I'll do something like section. By the time I save, head over to my browser, and this is what I'm getting. Oh, section is also affecting it. What will I do? So let me do something like article and not section. So sorry guys. So if I do this, No, not there. So let me do this real quick. So if I do something like this, let me say article. If I save this, head over to my browser and see this is what I'm getting. Good. Now I want to do a little bit of CSS layout and positioning. So now let me head over to VS Code and actually go back to my CSS. Now what do I need to do in this CSS file? Now first of all, the form, I want to give it a margin button. I want to give the form a margin button so that the other text will be pushed down a bit. So I copy this and paste it here and save. So that's for that. Then what I will do now is my article. I will target the article and I can see float. I'll do something like left. If I do this and I head over to my browser, this is what you notice. Okay, there's nothing happening. Now this is because I've already set it to float, but I didn't specify a width. So all I need to do is to go back to my VS Code. What I will do next is by saying, okay, I want to give them a width. Now I'm having three boxes. Now if I divide 100 by 3, I'm supposed to get 33.3. So let me just do something like width. If I set the width to 33.3 percentage, now 33.3% times 3, approximately 100. So if I go back to my browser, now this is what I'm getting. Good. So that's what the float is doing. Now you can see that some things are now going to the left while others are. So take note of that. I can use this to create a main and an aside. This was kind of funny to pronounce. So let me go back to VS Code. This is what I want to do again. If I decide to come back and do something like a border, and I say 1 pixel solid black, then watch what will happen. Just this border, just watch what will happen. You can see that my these things are already coming down. I will explain this shortly. What if I do something like if I add the padding again? If I add the padding, you don't know padding is an internal space. Let me say padding of 10 pixel. If I see and head over to my browser, what will you notice? Notice that okay, the 10 pixel padding didn't really show that much. So let me go back to VS Code again. Uh, Let me change the padding to 20 pixel. Now I also want to set the text align to justify so that it will be arranged. The text align justify. So if I go back to my browser, now this is what I'm getting. Good. Now if you notice this guy is still coming down. Now what will I do to fix this? If I come back to VS Code, a quick fix to this will be to do something like box sizing to be border box. Now if I do this and head over to my browser, now watch what I'm getting. Boom! Everything are now arranged. Now what the box size and border box is doing is trying to say both the content, the padding, all of them should fit into that space of the border. So that's what that guy is doing. Now if I'm using something like Flexbox to do this, it will be way easier. I don't need to stress myself about that. I think I'm going to show you guys real quick. So let's go back. Like I said, I won't hit more of Flexbox. It's just a little bit of it. Now for Flexbox, all I need to do is that I'm going to go back here and give them a container. Let me do something like main. Now for this main, this is just a tag. This is nothing serious. So if I come back and do something like this, by the time I save, come back here, I can now do something like this main. So first of all, let me show you on the browser now. If I go back to my browser, you notice that this is what I'm getting. Everything is now back to normal. Let me come back to VS Code again. Now I can do something like main. Then I will set the display of this to be flex. The display flex. Then just by doing this alone, this is what we'll get. If I come back to my browser, this is what we're getting. Just by setting display of flex. Can you see what this is giving? Now let me go back to VS Code again and do something real quick. Let me just say text align or justify. Those other flex properties are really not needed here. If I go back to my browser, you know what text align justify is supposed to do. So the text are now arranged. Good. So now let me head over to my uh, VS Code. Let me do something real quick. Now I can now start get the main article. And what will I do with this? I can now give something like a border. I say 1 pixel solid black. And I'll give a padding of 20 pixel. I'll give I can also give a margin, it won't affect it. I can say margin, then let me say 10 pixel. If I do this and head over to my browser, this is what I will get. So boom, this is what that guy is doing. So just with Flexbox, you can see the effect I'm getting. There's no stress. Now let me demo the grid real quick. If I head over to VS Code I'll comment this guy out. I'll come back and say main. I set my display to grid. Now this guy is not doing anything. If I head over to my browser, this is what we get. So the grid is not yet doing anything. Now there are other properties I will set with the grid. So what I will do is that I'll go back to VS Code, then set those properties. What I can do something like main. Okay, no, not even the main. I can do it here. I'll see grid template columns. Now I'll see repeat, use a function. Now I'll see 3 comma auto. If I do this and I save, anytime I head over to my browser, I can see what I'm getting. So boom, this is what I'm getting. Now when I go back to VS Code again, if I want this thing to be formatted, I can now copy these styles. So let me just grab these guys, then put them over here, then paste this guy here and save. So when I head over to my browser, that's what I'm getting. So another thing I can use in terms of grid template columns, I can do something like 3 comma 1 fraction. So I can also specify with, but these are more better than doing those 33.3%. This is more accurate. So let me just go back. So like I said, we won't be focusing on grid and flexbox. So let's go back to float. So I just showed you guys this for you to get the understanding. So if I save this, let's go back to this float. So I will uncomment this. And after doing this, what I will do is I'll go back to my index.html. I'll remove this main tag. Flexbox and grid, they require you to add the parent container to the element. Flow doesn't require a parent element. Now if I come back, now this was what I did before. This was what I had before. If I go back to my browser, this is what I'm getting, right? So take note. If I come back to this stuff, this is what I'll do. Now if I want to place another element under, let me see, I come down here, this place, and I do something like okay, now let me just do something real quick. Now what will happen is that I will highlight all of these guys, then I'll bring back to article, and this is what I'll do. I'll use a class. I'll say article dot main. So this will give me an article with a class of main. I'll say lorem 300. I'll save that, come back again. I'll say article dot aside. I'll say lorem 200. If I save this and this, okay. Let me just put an ordinary article here. I don't just want to have a class. Let me say lorem 100. And if I save this and come back, I watch what will happen. By the time I get to my style.css, but let me check my browser, what I'm having on my browser. Okay, this is what's happening. Okay, fine. Let me show you what I want to do. If I come back to VS Code, I want to target them by using the class and not the tag name. So what I'll do, I'll comment this guy. I'll come back. I'll say dot main. I want to float it to the left. I'll say float. I'll say left. Now I'll set the width, main content of my website. I want it to be 70%, right? And I cannot do something like aside. And I'll say I want to float it to right. And I want to give a width of 30%. If I save this and head over to my browser, now this is what I'm getting, left and right. Now you notice that the other div is coming down, like it's under this first one, which is not supposed to be so. I don't want them to be like this. Remember, if I was using something like flexbox and grid, it won't give me this effect. So what I can do to fix this is that I come back here on my VS Code. This last guy, what will happen is that I can give it a class, or I can just put an empty div. I'll do something like .cl arrow. Then I'll come back to, okay, let me know the div. Let me just use something like what tag can I use now? Let me just use small. I don't know. Seems like I'm running out of tag names. So let me just come back. I can do something like the .cl arrow. And I'll see clear. Then I'll see bold. So if I save this and head over to my browser, I see that okay, it didn't fix it. So come here, let me. Seems like because this small is an inline element by default. Let me set the display to block first. Let me see what will happen. I think it's supposed to work now. If I come back, boom, you can see that it's working. Now, I would have used a div there, but I already have a div. I don't want excess class or so you know what I mean. So let me just go back to my VS Code. So that's that about CSS layout and positioning. When we are working, we would know how to apply them. So what will happen is that okay, let me just keep this. Now let's go back to our PowerPoint slide. Let me show you something real quick. Now for CSS positioning, we have these basic types of positioning. There might be more than that. So for the ones I have, I have static position, fixed position, sticky position, absolute position, and relative position. Now let me explain that. Now for static position is the default position of every element that are coming to the web page. So that then for fixed positioning, you are trying to tell the element to be fixed irrespective of wherever the browser is or whatever that is happening. Now this is good for social media links, things like when you go to a website and you just want them to be seeing something, maybe like a contact button or a WhatsApp button or icon or so. That's why for sticky position, sticky it possesses the behavior of both static and fixed. So it is static to some extent, then when you get to some setting, you have it to be fixed, depending on how you want it to be. Then for absolute position and relative, they always go together. If I want to set absolute position, I must set its parent container to relative so that it will be relatively absolute to it. It's kind of somehow. So for absolute position, if you don't set the parent to be relative, it will be relative to the browser. So we'll see this real quick when we get to VS Code. Now, what I'll do is that I'll go back to my VS Code. Let's talk about positioning now on VS Code. Enough of the I don't know what to say. So what will happen is that so let me go back to my index.html. So we've already seen static. Static is the default one. Now take for instance, I have something like a button. I have something like a button. I want to demonstrate the fixed positioning. If I have a button, for instance, and I see contact me, so let me do this like this. Now, if I do this, contact me, and I head over to my CSS, I have a lot of buttons. So let me give this one a class of contact. So if I save this and head over to my CSS file, this is what I'll do. I'll say dot contact. Now I want to set the position to be fixed. If I do this from the left, I want it to be 20 pixel. Then from bottom, I want it to be 20 pixel as well. Let me increase the font size to be let me say 20 pixel, and let me also increase the padding to be 10 pixel top and down, then 5 pixel left and right. So by the time I do this and save, if I head over to my browser, most of the time get so good. This is the button. So you can see now this button is fixed at this position. What I give to it, remember, if I come back to my VS Code, I did something like from left 20 pixel from bottom. So I can change this to right. I change this to right. Watch what will happen. It fixed at the right hand side, which is way better. If I come back, so this is the button, contact me. Irrespective of where I am on the screen, I always see this. It's always good for social media and stuff like that. Then sometimes it is also used for navigation bar. So please take note. We use a fixed and sticky for navigation bar. Let's talk about the position sticky. Now for position sticky, let's head over to VS Code. How is that done? Now for position sticky, I can do something like this. So let me just comment this guy. I will demonstrate or using that button. I can do something like so I'll say dot contact. I'll say position sticky. If I do this, now let's just watch what will happen. By the time I go back to my browser, you can see that nothing is happening. So the contact me button is still there. Nothing is happening. But let me show you how the sticky will come into play. If I go back to my VS Code, remember I said sticky behaves as static and fixed. So I can now say, okay, from the top, I want it to be sticky from the top at a height of about 200 pixels. Just watch what will happen. If I save this and head over to my browser, now this is what I will get. By the time I'm scrolling, okay, you didn't take note of this. Okay, now because it's at the bottom, so what will happen is that I will head over to VS Code. Yeah, I'm on VS Code. Now this is what I will do. Come back to this place. I will take this button and I'll put it upstairs so that you see the effect very well. If I take this guy and put it somewhere around Let me use a noticeable environment. So let me just see. Okay, below the sections. Let me just put it here and see if I do that and I head over to my browser. Now, okay, this was happening. I will get to a height of 200. And you see what's happening. It is static by default, but when you get to that height, what will happen? It will turn to fixed. So that's sticky for you. So in fact, let me go back and reduce it. If I come back to VS Code, I want to reduce this height. 200 is too big. Let me say from the height of 100 pixel, which is 100 pixel from the top. If I go back to my browser, this is what we'll notice. So by the time I scroll down, this is what will happen. From a height of 100 pixels is now fixed. So this is the button right here. So take note of it. That's sticky, combining the property of static and fixed. So take note. So let's head over to VS Code and talk about the relative and absolute real quick. So if I come back to VS Code, what I'll do is that I'll go back to my index.html and I'll come downstairs. I want to give a div with a class of box. So if I do this, I'll save it down inside of this box. I'll put a paragraph, or let me say I'll put each theory inside of it. And this is what I'll do. I'll say move me. Okay, this is what I'll do. Then I come back to my CSS file. What I'll do now, I can target that box. I'll say I want it to have a border of 3 pixels, solid red. I want it to be visible. And I want to have a width of 800 pixels and a height of 800 pixels. So this will give me a box. Now I can say margin to be auto so that it will go to the center of the page. Margin, then auto. Let me just set the height to be something like 400. So if I save this, head over to my browser and see this is what I'm getting. Now I want to move this element inside this box. Now what do I do? If I come back to my VS Code, I can now set the position of the H3 to be absolute. Now by saying so, I'll say the box H3. I'll say I want the position to be absolute. Now, by the time I do this, and then over to my browser, and see this is what I'm getting. Now, go this is now absolute. But how do I know that this thing is really working? If I go over to VS Code, I can now move it around. I can do something like from the top. I want it to be 20 pixels from the top. So if I do this and head over to my browser, this is what you notice. Boom, this is no longer here. Now remember I said something. If I'm setting the position of something to be absolute, it means I must set its parent container to be relative. Otherwise, it will be relatively absolute to the browser. You can see now this is moving with respect to the whole of the browser. Now how do I solve this? Is by coming back to VS Code and doing something like this. I can now say okay dot box. You just will come here and say position relative. By the time I do this and go back to my VS Code, you can see this thing is now fixed. So it's now 20% from the top. If I want it to be from the right or from the bottom, I can now do something like this. If I come back to VS Code, I will do something like this from um, right. Let me say 20 pixel as well. So what should happen when I get to my browser? So boom, so it's now 20% from the right of this container. So I can also do something like bottom property. So just to come here and say bottom. Now you can give any value of your choice. I'm just using 20 pixel. I come back to my browser. This is what I'm getting. So that's that about that. So let's head over to VS Code and look at something else before we start the project. Now the last thing I want to show you is how to add image using CSS. Now remember we added an image with HTML, but how do we add an image using CSS? Now let's say for instance I want to add an image to this box, or I can also add an image to any element of my shot, maybe the background of anything. So what I can do, I can come here and say background color. Background color is a property to set only color. I can do something like background image. Background image is a property to set image. But if I want to, like I can add an image with this. But if I want a general name, I can say something like background. With this, I can add a color. I can also add an image. Now, real quick, what I'll do is that I'll come back to this my directory. I'll copy this image. Now I'll paste it right inside the CSS folder. So this is what I'll do on my style of CSS. So I want to put an image here. So just do something like URL is a function. Then what I need to do is to specify the path of where this is coming from. So since it's the same part, I'll just say social.png. By the time I save this and head over to my browser, so boom, this is what I'm getting. Now you can see that the image is kind of repeating. So this is the first part of it. Then when it stops, it's repeating itself. So there are other different properties I can set. I can go back to my VS Code and do something like this. I can say, okay, I want a uh, background position of center. That will take you to the center. So let me just show you something quick. If I come back to VS Code, to my browser rather, this is what I'm getting, background position of center. It's not positioned at the center, but it's still cutting or it's still breaking. So there's something I can do also to fix it. You can set the background size to cover. So background size to cover. So by the time I do this and head over to my browser, this is what I'm getting. So you can see it's no longer repeating. Don't forget we still got this guy right here. So if I come back to my VS Code, I can do something like background repeat, no repeat, but background repeat. Let me just show you this background repeat. I can see no repeat. Now, since I've already set cover, you won't see the effect of this. Let me just remove the cover so that you see the effect of this. By the time I come back, boom, this is what we're getting. So the image is no longer repeating itself. So take note of that. So I can add these two properties together, but I just wanted to see the effect of that one. That's why I removed it. So if I come back, that is what I'm getting. So that's all about CSS and all of the basic of CSS. So what we're going to do is that we're going to combine the knowledge of whatever we've learned, combine all of them, and we use them to create a simple project. So guys, I would encourage you to just stay for the project. You guys are doing great. So let's get started with the project. So like I said, this is just a simple project to put together all we've learned all throughout the course. So what I'll do is that I will create a folder inside of this, like I did when I was doing HTML. I'll say CSS underscore project. I want to use an underscore. CSS underscore project. So after doing this, I can now create an index.html. Then I'll create a style.css. Then I'll look for an image and bring to this directory. But first of all, let me bring out my boilerplate by doing something like this. I'll save. I'll come back here. Okay, there's nothing I'll do there yet. So for now, I can do something like CSS project as my title. And I'll link my file. There's a short form. I'll say link column CSS. So by the time I do this, it will point to this style.css file. So please take note of that. Take note of that. If I come down here, so what did I want on my website? Like I said, this is just a little project to showcase all we've learned during the course. So what I will do is that I'll start by creating a simple website. This is like a freestyle, like I'm not looking at anything. I just want to try and design something from my head. So let's get started. Now what I'll do is that I will start with of course a heading. I'll say H1, I'll say let me see GB media. I would have styled my previous work, but I don't want to style that one. Let's just continue. Let's just create a new one from scratch. So I'll do something like a header. And inside this header, what I will do, I will say welcome. Okay, let me put the head in there. Let me see H1. I'll say welcome outside today to the GB media. Oh god, what's wrong? The GB media. So by the time I do this, so this video is taking way longer than expected. So I can now do something like a nav. So I'm making use of my semantic tag. So under this nav, I'll have something like UL greater than LI greater than this as a 4, then greater than these are just shortcuts. So I can go use what I'm looking for. So I can do something like say about, and say contact, very quick. I will say services. And after this, the next thing I'll do is that okay. So what I'll do is that I will have a section. I will have a main, and under this main, I will say Lauren 200. Now I will talk about responsive design at the end of this little project. So we'll make it responsive. We'll get there. And I can do something like an aside. And under this aside, I'll say lorem 100. So if I do this, I'll see. Then what I want to do again, I want to add the copyright symbol. I want to add the copyright symbol so I can come downstairs and do something like footer. I'll see copyright. Then I'll see and copy. And I'll say 2023. So if I do this, then go back upstairs, there's something I want to do. Now I want this header to be under my nav. So real quick, let me just put this right here. Just because of the style I have on my mind. So let me just do it like this. So if I come back, okay, what I'll do is that I'll copy path, right click and copy path. So if I head over to my browser, what do I want to do? I'll paste it like we did in HTML. I want to make use of live server. I'll just make use of reload. So this is what I will do. So guys, let's try this and turn it into something better. So I'll go back to VS Code. Now what I want to do in VS Code, I come back to my style.css. I can do something like this. Now it's a good design practice to always set. Remember, I said everything that are coming to your web page are coming with some default padding and margin and some styling. So it's a good design practice to always set those margin to be 0 pixel, and I'll set my default padding to be 0 pixel. And I'll set my box sizing. Remember, you saw box sizing the other time. So I explained it earlier. So if I come back to my browser, this is what I'm getting by the time I reload. So there are no default styles. Good. So real quick, let's head over to VS Code and add styles to this. So first thing I want to do is that on my CSS, I want to set the body, and then I want to set the font family of the body to be sans serif. So this is what I will do. I'll say body, font family. Now if I do this, remember there are different options to pick from. Now let me just take this real quick. These are web safe font. If I should pick any of these, let me say I pick this for instance. What will happen is that it will look for area. If it doesn't see area, it will load the vertical. If it doesn't find out, it will load sans serif. So please take note. That's how this thing works. So if I go back to my browser, you can see if I reload, that's what I'm getting. So it's coming from there. So let me go back to VS Code and do some styling real quick. Now for the body, okay, I want it to be on a full screen stuff. So what I will do now, I can now do something like for my AD, I want to set the text align to center. So let's give that as center. So if I come back to my browser, this is what we notice by the time I reload. This is what I'm getting. So they are now placed at the center of the web page. Good. So let's go back to VS Code and do something. Now let me style the nav real quick. Now for the nav, this is what I will do. I will say something like nav. I can do something like text align center, but what I want to do, I want to say display or flex, then align items to center. So by the time I do this and head over to my browser, this is what I'm getting when I will reload. It's not working. Let me go back to VS Code again. I was wrong. If I come back to my index.html, let me cross check. I have a nav display of flex, uh, nav display flex, oh, sorry, I'm supposed to use justify content center. So this is what I'm supposed to do, not align items. So if I come back here and reload, this is what I'm getting. So good. So if I come back to my VS Code, I want to talk about the nav UL. So I can do something like display, flex, I'll say align item center. Now, what align item center does is that it aligns them horizontally. That's what that guy does. Why justify content center? It places it at the center of the page. So let me just put the two properties. Let me say justify content center. So if I do this and come back to my browser, so if I reload this is what I'm getting. Good. So that's what I want. Now, real quick, what I'll do is that I'll go over to my VS Code. I want to style this heading separately. So I don't want the same style to be applied to both headings. So let me see dot intro. If I save this, come back to my index.html, this place, let me do something like class name. maybe with the class of intro. So good, that's better. If I come back to my CSS, I can do something like list style type. Remember, I will talk about this list style type. I'll set it to none. Then don't forget this thing as UNLIE. I can set the text decoration to none. By the time I do this and head over to my browser, this is what you notice. If I reload, this is what I'm getting. Good. So this is what I want. Now, for let me go back to my VS Code again. Now, this is what I want to do. For this intro, I want to give it a background color of black, then a text color of white. So I'll say color of white. And I also want to add the padding. I'll say padding of let me see 20 pixel. So if I do this and head over to my browser and I reload this is what I'm getting. Good. Then for the nav bar, let's go and start the nav bar. For my nav bar, this is what I will do. I set display of flex and this of this. So I want to see the width of this guy. If I see width, no, let me say background color. With the background color, I can know the width I have. If I say background color red, for instance, and I head over to my browser, if I reload this is what I'm getting, right? Good. Now this is what I can do. If I come back to um this page, this is what I can do. I can set the flex of this guy to be 1 so that it will take up the full width of his container. If I do this, I will head over to my browser. If I reload this is what I'm getting, right? Then I can now do something. If I come back to VS Code, I can set this guy. I will say I want this one to have a padding of 0 pixel top and bottom, and from left and right it should be let me see 10% from left and right. Good. That's what I want to do. Then for this one, I want these guys to have a justified content of space between. I don't want it to be center again. Let me say space between. If I do this list type, okay, good. If I do this and I head over to my browser, by the time I reload, this is what I'm getting. Boom. Now let's head over to VS Code and fix this quickly. If I come back to VS Code, I think that was because I misspelled padding. You want to see padding. So if I do this and save, by the time I go back to my browser, if I reload this, good. Okay, I'm getting what I want. So guys, let's see a lot of things I want to do. So let me go back to my VS Code. Um, Now one thing I want to do again is that for these allies, I did something like this, right? Now I want to do something again. I can do something like we now have VLLI. I want to set the background color of red so that you notice something. If I come back to my browser and I remove this, you notice that these texts are okay. So there's something I can do, a quick fix I can do. If I come back to my VS Code again, I can set their flex to 1. If I say flex 1, then means they will take up the field. So if I say um, go back to my browser, this is what you notice. By the time I reload, this is what I'm getting. So now they are positioned to the left of the elements. That's what I want you guys to notice. So if I come back to my VS Code, something I can do is that I can do something like display flex again, or I can just say text align to center instead of saying display flex again. By the time I come back to my browser and I reload, this is what I'm getting good. So that's a good fix. For now, this thing is too small. I want to give it a padding, right? So what I will do is that um I'll come back to my VS Code. I can do something like this. Let me see. I don't want this background color. Let me see padding of let me see 20 pixel again. If I do this, and I come back to my browser, by the time I remove this, that's what I'm getting. But now I also want them to have a color. So let me just come back here, right? Now this is what I will do, this is what I want. So if I come back to VS Code, um, what do I want to do again? Now if you notice real quick, this thing is the text are coming from the anchor. So I can see the color. I want the color to be white, right? Now if I save this and head over to my browser, um, Okay, this is what I'll get. The color is white. So I think it's okay that way. So let me go over to VS Code because I don't want this video to be longer than this. It's taking much of our time. So I can now do something like now VLLIE. Let me just add the over state. Over HOVR. Now I want a situation by when I over it will have a color of black. BLACK. If I do this, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to use this syntax to call this guy, put this right here if I save, and head over to my browser. If I reload, now watch what is happening. But it thing is too fast, it's too fast. There's something I can do, I can add the transition properties, so these are more properties. These are kind of advanced in a way, CSS animation and the rest of them, but let me just do it. So I can do something like, I add the transition here, I'll say 0.5 second is in and out. This will give a slight delay. So if I save this and head over to my browser, by the time I reload, this is what I'm getting. Can you see it? A slight delay. So now let's do the styling of the header. So let me go back to my VS Code. Now for the header, that can take a background image. But let me just use ordinary background. I'll see URL. Okay, I don't have an image here, but I want to bring an image. I'll see social.png. So this is what I want to use. So I can copy this image, then paste it inside of this project. So if I paste, good, it's now on the same directory with it. My CSS social.png. So if I save this and head over to my browser, if I reload, this is what I'm getting. Now I want to give this guy a width and a height. Let me talk about something real quick. Uh, I feel like laughing. I don't know why. So I can do something like it already has a width of 100%. Good. So I'll say height. Height. Let me see. 300 pixel will be enough. So if I save this and head over to my browser, by the time I reload, this is what I'm getting. Now good. I want to explain something to you guys. Now, like I said, this image is repeating. There are other properties I can set. Things like setting the background size to cover, right? I can see background, position to center. We looked at this, right? Then background repeats to no repeats. If I do this, background repeats to no repeats. So if I do this and head over to my browser, if I reload, you can see what I'm getting, right? And this is now the center. Now there are some other stuff I can do center, but you guys should look at that on your own. How do I position this text at the center? Now it's very simple. You can some people see padding, margin, all those stuff, but I don't like doing that. So the best way is by using this flex property. That will align it at the center correctly. So what do I do? Inside of this, I've used a lot of flex and I plan not to use flex, but I'm used to flex honestly. So let's see how the future will be. Maybe I might do a video on flex or recommend materials for you guys to read. So I'll say the display should be flex. Then I'll say align item center, justify contents to center. This will align that each one that is under this heading. So if I see, if you can see now, it's now at the center of this container. Now, but there's something I want you guys to take note of. If I should come back, I don't like this black text. Yeah, the black text is not that beautiful. So if I come back to my VS Code, I can set the color. So I can say color that will affect the text. So LORO. Now I can set this to white. If I do this and head over to to my browser, by the time I reload, I see that the color is white. But there's something I want you guys to take note of. This background image, there's a way I can darken it a bit so that the text will stand out. So let me show you how to do that. So if I go back to my VS Code, I can do something like this. Now, if I want to darken my background image, I'll do it from this place. Remember, if I'm doing background, there's something I can set. I can see linear gradient, linear, okay, coming, can spell this correctly. Linear gradient, okay, good, is a function. Now say RGBA, I'll say 0.0, 0.5 for dark. So linear gradient is talking about the mixing of two colors. So I'm just mixing two the same colors. So I'll say RGBA again. I'll say 0.0, 0.5. By the time I do this, close my bracket. I'll separate this with a comma. If I save and head over to my browser, if I reload this, you can see that the image is not, the text is not standing out. So I think it's better that way. So what about this side? How are we going to do it? Remember, I have a main and an aside. So let's go back to VS Code. How do I style it? So let me just check real quick. I have a main and aside. So good. So on my in my CSS file, this one I'll say main. I want to use float. I don't want to use flex here. I will say float left. I'll set the width. Uh, I'll set the width to be 70%. Let me just put my comma here. Made a mistake before. So I'll say aside. I will say float to the right. Um, and I'll say the width should be 30%. If I do this and head over to my browser, this is what you notice. By the time I reload, this is what I'm getting. Now you can see what I'm getting from this place. You notice that this float is working, but this guy is under. So I showed you guys how to fix this from the lecture. I showed you guys how to fix it. So how do you fix it? If I head over to my VS Code, I can fix that by going to the index.html file and adding a div with a class of CLRO. So if I do something like this, I can now come to my style.css, then I will say .clr class. I want to give it a clear of both. So if I do this and head over to my browser, um, by the time I reload, so this is what's happening. Good. It's now under, so on its own separate line. So good. Now I want to do something. If you look at this place, these things are too close to the end of the screen. So I want to add the padding. So how do I do that? If I go back to my VS Code, just real quick, can I put it on the board? You know, it will affect everything. So let me just come back to my index.html. Let me just put this on a section, put in a section tag. So if I call this guy, put it right here, it doesn't matter, I can put this one under, right? So by the time I save and come back to my style.css, I can target that section. So after the header, let me just target the section. Now what do I want to this section? I want to have a padding of from top and bottom. Let me see 20 pixel, then from left and right 10%. So if I do this and I save, if I head over to my browser and reload, this is what I'm getting. So it's a bit neat. Yeah, it's better this way. So if I do this, no, the last thing that's left for us to style is this copyright symbol. So that's my footer. By the time I head over to VS Code, what do I do with that? So I can do something like footer. I'll give a background color of black and a text color of white. I can add a padding of 10 pixel, then text align of center. So if I do this and head over to my browser, by the time I reload, boom, you can see that it's a bit better. So guys, this is about the styling. It didn't take us much time, but if you look, it's a bit neat and a bit better. But this is not responsive. What do we mean by responsiveness? Responsiveness is talking about how your website will look on various devices. So if I press something like my F12 or I inspect, just watch what we're going to get. You can see that on this screen side it is better. It is better. It is better. Okay, it's a bit responsive. The reason it's a bit responsive is because I made this of flexbox. But you can see at this position now is no longer better. So what I want to do is that whenever we get to a width of okay, let me use a width of 780. I will remove the flow so that both of them will take up the full width. Let me just show you that with responsiveness. Let's head over to VS Code. Let's fix that real quick. So come back to VS Code. You can see at so this is how to write responsive design. So by the time I press at media screen, and so it's a condition at max width of 780 pixel. And what did I want to do? What it is trying to say is that the styles I will apply will only work if the max width of the screen is 780. So from 781 and above, it won't apply, but from 780 and below, it will apply. So what did I want to do? I want to take the aside and the main. So I want to take the aside. I also want to take the main. So what did I want to do with them? I want to set the float to none, right? Then I'll set the width to 100%. That's what I want to do. So the same thing for this also. If I do this, I can paste this right here. By the time I save, go back to my browser. If I reload this is what I'm getting. This is what I'm getting. So that's for that. So you can see that I've removed this. So I also want to give them text align or justify. Then we'll go over to the heading shortly. You can see the heading is no longer balanced. Okay, we'll look at that shortly. So if I come back to my VS Code again, how do I apply the style? Now for this also, okay, since both of them are on that section, I can just say section. I'll say text align or justify, so that will be a bit neat. Then for this guy, I can give it a margin bottom of 20 pixels. So if I do this, now my header, I say the text are kind of breaking. So let me just say the header, and I'll say H1. For this size, I want the font size to be a bit smaller. Let me say the font size should be, let me say 40 pixels. Let me see what 40 pixels will give me. Like I said, I'm just sticking to pixel. I don't want to do the rents and all of that. So if I see this is what I'm getting. Uh, okay, that 40 pixels is still no good. So what I will do is that I'll come back to my VS Code again. I can. Okay, fine. I don't want to target this here. I don't want to target this here. So let me just copy all of this, right? Let me do this. Now, if I go back to my VS Code, that thing is usually changing when I get to, let me see, okay, let me see 655 pixel. Now that's when I want to start down. If I come back to my VS Code, you know what I will do. Also, okay, when the max width is 665 pixel, 665 pixel, what do I want to do? I want to take the header header H1, and I want to give it a font size of 25 pixel. I think this will do it. So if I save and go back to my browser, by the time I reload, so that's what I'm getting. It's now kind of smaller. You get, so this is a bit responsive. A bit responsive. I can also change the style of my nav bar. So how do I change the style of my nav bar? So when we get to this 65 pixel as well, let me go back to my VS Code. So I want to change the style of the nav. So for the nav, so look, this is what I applied. I applied all of this. So what will happen is that I'll copy all of this style. Nav display flex. Okay, it's for the UL. I'll say the nav UL, right? I want to set the nav UL to a display of block. So if I save this and head over to my browser, if I reload, uh, this is what is happening. So good. This is a bit responsive. So I can as well target this welcome to GP Media and reduce the style for smaller width. So should we do that? So let me just go back to VS Code again. This is getting interesting. So I can copy this guy. Let me check something real quick. Browser. Okay, 450. Okay, let me say for 450 pixel. So let me head over to VS Code. So for this now, I say for 450 pixel. 450 pixel. What I want to do, I want this size to be uh, say 18 pixel. So this is just how to do responsiveness. It's really not difficult. If I come back to my browser and reload this, so by the time I get smaller, this is what is happening. So boom, this is a bit responsive. This is responsive. So my GB media, I can decide to reduce it. Let me just do that real quick. So if I come back, so I can see dot what did I call it? I give it a class of intro. So I'll say dot intro intro. So I can also something like font size of, let me put this to be 25 pixel. I don't want it to be too small. So this is 25 pixel. If I come back to my browser and reload, so good. This is a bit okay when it's big, when it's small. So this is how to make a responsive website. Now when we get to JavaScript, it is not good for this thing to be open, so we can add a little hamburger button so that when we click on it, it will open, we can be able to toggle it and just that. So for now guys, this is what we are having. We've been able to put together what we've learned, all through the tutorial, and we've been able to build this little project using CSS. So guys, that's it. We've come to the end of the CSS crash course, and I really appreciate you guys for staying with me all through the tutorial. I will have all of the codes and files pushed up to the GitHub repository so you can do well to check it out. Now, so please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel, and also do well to follow us on our social media handles. Also, watch out for our JavaScript crash course.